Jake Miller was drinking his morning coffee when the world changed forever. He sat at his desk deep inside NORAD, watching dozens of computer screens that showed radar readings from across North America. It was just another Tuesday morning until the screens started going crazy. "Sir, we have a problem," called out Sergeant Lisa Roberts from across the room. Her voice was tight with worry. "I'm seeing multiple contacts approaching from everywhere." Jake put down his coffee cup and walked over to her station. What he saw on the screen made his blood run cold. Hundreds of objects were dropping out of the sky above every major city on Earth. They were huge, bigger than any aircraft humans had ever built. "Get me the president on the line," Jake said, his voice steady despite the fear growing in his chest. "And contact every military base we have. This is not a drill." 3 hours later, the world watched in horror as massive ships hung in the sky above New York, London, Tokyo, and 50 other cities. The ships were beautiful in a terrifying way, made of what looked like dark crystal that seemed to bend light. Around them, they cast shadows that covered entire city blocks. Dr. Amy Roberts stood on the roof of the Pentagon, looking up at the ship hanging over Washington, D.C. She was one of the few people on Earth who studied the possibility of alien life, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. The ship was silent, just floating there like a dark cloud that refused to move. "They're waiting for something," she said to General Frank Carter, who stood beside her. "This isn't random. They chose these cities for a reason." General Carter nodded grimly. He had fought in 3 wars, but this was unlike anything he had ever faced. The question is, what do they want? They got their answer an hour later. Every television, radio, and computer screen on Earth suddenly showed the same image. It was a creature that looked almost human, but wrong in ways that made people's skin crawl. Its skin was pale gray, its eyes were too large, and when it spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once. "People of Earth," the creature said in perfect English, though its mouth didn't quite match the words. "I am War Prime Kethfer of the Xanthari Empire. Your world now belongs to us." The alien leader stood in what looked like a command center filled with strange technology. Behind him, other gray-skinned creatures worked the controls that glowed with soft blue light. "We have studied your species for many of your years," Kethfer continued. "You are primitive but capable of basic labor. Those who submit will be allowed to live as workers. Those who resist will be eliminated." The screen changed to show images that made people around the world gasp in horror. Burning cities on alien worlds. Creatures that might have been people being marched in chains. Entire planets turned into mining operations. "You have 72 of your hours to surrender completely," Kethfer said. "After that time, we will take your world by force." This is not a negotiation. This is an announcement. The broadcast ended, leaving the world in stunned silence. In the White House, President Lisa Martinez sat with her advisors, trying to process what they had just witnessed. She was the first female president, elected because people trusted her to handle any crisis. But no one had prepared for this. "Options?" she asked simply. Secretary of Defense Paul Hamilton shook his head. "Ma'am, their technology is clearly far beyond ours. Those ships showed up without any of our systems detecting them until they were already here. We have no idea what kind of weapons they have. So we surrender?" asked the president. General Carter, who had rushed back from the Pentagon, spoke up. "Ma'am, with respect, surrender isn't in my vocabulary. These aliens made one big mistake." "What's that, General?" "They think we're going to act like every other species they've conquered. They expect us to be logical, to look at their superior technology and give up. But they don't understand the first thing about humans." Dr. Amy Roberts, who had been studying the alien broadcast, looked up from her tablet. The general is right, Madam President. I've been analyzing their behavior, their speech patterns, even the way they stand. Everything about them screams rigid hierarchy and logical thinking. They've probably never encountered a species that doesn't follow predictable patterns. Meanwhile, in Colorado Springs, Jake Miller was coordinating with military bases around the world. The picture was becoming clear. The aliens had ships over every major population center, but they hadn't attacked yet. They were waiting for humanity's surrender. "This is Colonel Steve Johnson at Fort Bragg," came a voice over the radio. "Sir, we've got eyes on the ship over Raleigh. It's just sitting there, but we're picking up some kind of scanning beams. They're studying us." "Copy that, Colonel," Jake replied. "All units maintain defensive positions, but do not engage unless attacked. We need to learn everything we can about these things." In New York City, millions of people stood in the streets, looking up at the massive ship casting its shadow over Manhattan. Some were crying, some were praying, but many were angry. This was their city, their planet, and nobody was going to take it without a fight. Captain Tony Rodriguez stood with his Marines in Central Park, watching the alien ship through binoculars. He had served 3 tours overseas and had never backed down from a fight. "What do you think, Captain?" asked Corporal Dan Parker. Tony lowered his binoculars and smiled grimly. "I think these aliens picked the wrong planet to mess with. They want a war? We'll give them one they'll never forget." Across the world, the same scene was playing out. Humans weren't cowering in fear as the aliens expected. They were getting angry, organizing, and preparing to fight. The Xanthari had made their first critical error. They had underestimated the human spirit. The 72-hour countdown had begun, but humanity wasn't planning to surrender. They were planning to survive. The first alien ship went down over the Nevada desert at 3 in the morning. It wasn't much bigger than a fighter jet, just a scout craft that had been scanning military installations. Captain Roy Adams had been leading a patrol when his radio crackled with orders from command. "Unknown aircraft heading your way, Captain. Shoot it down if you can." Roy looked up at the strange craft gliding silently overhead. It glowed with the same blue light as the massive ships hanging over the cities. Without hesitation, he gave the order to fire. The surface-to-air missile struck the scout ship and sent it crashing into the desert sand. "Got it," Roy reported back. "The thing's down and burning." Within hours, a team of scientists arrived at the crash site. Dr. Kevin Jang, a physicist from MIT, knelt beside the twisted metal and strange crystals scattered across the sand. He had studied theoretical alien technology for years, but seeing it up close was different than anything he had imagined. "This is incredible," he said to his partner, Dr. Rachel Kim, a computer expert who specialized in breaking codes. "Look at this metal. It's like nothing we've ever seen, but the basic principles are still physics." Rachel was more interested in a device that looked like it might be a computer. She carefully removed it from the wreckage and connected her laptop to it with cables. "Kevin, look at this. Their computer systems are actually less complex than ours in some ways. They seem to rely on one central brain to make all the decisions." Meanwhile, in occupied territory outside Chicago, Captain Tony Rodriguez was learning hard lessons about fighting aliens. The Xanthari had landed ground troops in several cities, and they were unlike anything human soldiers had ever faced. They were tall, gray-skinned, and moved with perfect coordination. But Tony discovered something important during his first battle with them. The aliens were good at fighting other armies, but they didn't know what to do when humans didn't fight. Like an army, they expect us to line up and shoot at each other, Tony explained to his men as they hid in an abandoned factory. But when we hit them from 6 different directions at once, they get confused. They keep trying to find our commanding officer to negotiate with. Sergeant Lisa Thompson had made the same discovery during a raid on an alien supply depot. The Centauri soldiers were well trained and had better weapons, but they couldn't adapt when humans did unexpected things. I threw a rock to distract them, and they all turned to look at it like they'd never seen anyone throw a rock before, she told Tony over the radio. These things might be smart, but they think like computers, not like people. Back at the crash site, Dr. Zhang was making even more important discoveries. The alien technology was advanced, but it was designed for their home world, not Earth. The Centauri came from a planet with different gravity, different air, and different weather. Their suits have to work overtime just to keep them alive here, he explained to General Carter during a video call. In hot weather, they overheat. In cold weather, their equipment slows down. And in rain, their sensors don't work as well. Dr. Rachel Kim had even better news. She had managed to break into the alien computer system from the crashed scout ship. What she found changed everything. "General, you need to see this," she said, her voice excited. Their entire military runs on one giant computer program called the Prime Mind. Every soldier, every ship, every weapon gets its orders from this one source. "What does that mean for us?" General Carter asked. "It means they're very good at coordinated attacks. But if something happens that the Prime Mind doesn't expect, the whole system gets confused. They can't improvise like we can." Across the Yay world, other scientists were making similar discoveries. In London, Dr. Patricia Davis was working with a team to understand the alien language. The Centauri communicated in precise mathematical patterns that left no room for doubt or interpretation. "They don't have words for concepts like maybe or perhaps," she explained to the British Prime Minister. "Everything is either true or false, right or wrong. They literally cannot understand uncertainty or confusion because they've never experienced it." In Tokyo, engineer Sandra Wells was studying wreckage from another downed scout ship. She discovered that Centauri weapons were incredibly powerful, but also incredibly predictable. They fired in perfect patterns that could be calculated and avoided if you knew the math. "It's like playing chess against a computer," she told her team. "The computer might be better at chess, but if you can make a move it doesn't understand, it might make a mistake." All this information was flowing back to command centers around the world, where military leaders were starting to form a plan. The aliens were superior in technology and firepower, but they had weaknesses that humans could exploit. Jake Miller, still coordinating from NORAD, was putting together the big picture. "They think like machines," he told President Martinez during their daily briefing. "They expect us to think like machines too. When we don't, they don't know how." To respond, the president leaned forward in her chair. "So how do we use this?" General Carter smiled for the first time since the aliens arrived. "We do what humans do best, ma'am. We get creative, we improvise, and we cause as much chaos as possible. These aliens have never fought anyone who doesn't follow the rules." "What rules?" the president asked. "Exactly," said the general. By the end of the second day, humanity had learned three crucial things about their enemy. The Centauri were powerful but rigid, advanced but predictable, and organized but unable to handle chaos. Most importantly, they had never fought an enemy that refused to surrender when defeat seemed certain. The real war was about to begin. And for the first time since the ships appeared, humans were starting to believe they might actually win. The bombing of New York City began at dawn on the fourth day. The massive Centauri ship opened fire with beams of blue energy that turned entire buildings into dust. The attack was precise and methodical, destroying one city block at a time in perfect rows. President Martinez watched the destruction from the White House bunker, her face pale but determined. The aliens had grown tired of waiting for humanity's surrender. Now they were showing the world what happened to species that refused to submit. "How many casualties?" she asked quietly. "Thousands, ma'am," replied General Carter. But the evacuation plans worked. Most people got out before the attack started. Similar attacks were happening in cities around the world. London, Tokyo, Paris, and dozens of other places were being systematically destroyed. But instead of breaking human will, the bombardment only made people angrier. In the ruins of downtown Manhattan, Carl Mitchell crawled through the subway tunnels with his team of engineers. Carl had spent 20 years building the city's underground infrastructure, and now he was using that knowledge to fight back. "The aliens are targeting surface structures," he explained to his team as they worked in the darkness. "But they don't understand that half of this city is actually underground. We can use the subway tunnels, the sewer systems, even the old subway lines that nobody remembers." Working with him was Nina Brooks, a young woman who had been kicked out of college for hacking into government computers. Now her skills were exactly what humanity needed. "I've tapped into the city's power grid," she said, typing rapidly on her laptop. "Every time they fire those energy beams, they create electromagnetic pulses. If we time it right, we can use their own attacks to overload their systems." Meanwhile, in a secret facility in Colorado, 18-year-old Alex Turner was working on something that might change the entire war. Alex was a genius who had been studying chaos theory, the science of how small changes could create big effects. "What if we stop trying to fight them like an army?" he asked Dr. Sandra Wells, the NASA engineer who was helping him. "What if we fight them like a swarm of angry bees?" Sandra looked at the equations covering Alex's whiteboard. "Explain it to me like I'm 5 years old." "Okay," Alex said excitedly. "Imagine you're trying to catch 100 ping-pong balls that are all bouncing in different directions. Even if you're really fast and really smart, you can't catch them all because they're not following any pattern. That's what we need to do to the aliens." Dr. Helen Foster, a psychologist who had been studying the alien broadcasts, understood what Alex was getting at. She had been analyzing every word and gesture from the Centauri communications. "Their entire society is based on order and logic," she explained. "They eliminated creativity thousands of years ago because they thought it was inefficient. They literally cannot understand why someone would do something that doesn't make logical sense." This gave Alex an idea that was so crazy it might actually work. He called it the Pandora Protocol, named after the Greek myth about the box that released chaos into the world. "What if we coordinate millions of random actions all at the same time?" he suggested. "Not random to us, but random to them. Things that look chaotic but actually serve a purpose they can't understand." The first test of Alex's theory happened in Chicago, where Captain Tony Rodriguez was still fighting guerrilla battles against Centauri ground forces. Tony had been given new orders. Instead of trying to win battles, his job was to confuse the enemy. "Listen up," he told his soldiers. "Today we're going to attack the alien base from the north. But before we do that, we're going to make noise in the south. And while we're making noise in the south, Team 2 is going to set off fireworks in the east. And Team 3 is going to play music really loud in the west." "What's the point, Captain?" asked one of his men. "The point is that when we actually attack from the north, their computer brain will be so busy trying to figure out what all the other stuff means that it won't see the real attack coming." The plan worked better than anyone expected. Byzantar soldiers spent so much time responding to false alarms that they left their base almost undefended. Tony's team walked in and destroyed their communication equipment without firing a shot. Captain Roy Adams tried a similar tactic in Nevada, but he added his own twist. Instead of just confusing the aliens, he started doing things that would make them think humans were completely insane. "We're going to attack their patrol, but we're going to do it while playing classical music and juggling," he told his confused soldiers. "Sir, That doesn't make any sense. Exactly. That's the point. When the Centauri saw human soldiers juggling, while shooting at them, they literally stopped fighting and tried to understand what they were seeing. It was the first time in their species' history that they had encountered behavior that served no logical purpose. The alien confusion spread through their ranks like a virus. Soldiers began asking their commanders questions they had never asked before. Why are the humans doing this? What does it mean? How do we respond to something that makes no sense? For the first time since the invasion began, the Prime Mind, the great computer that controlled all Centauri forces, started making mistakes. It began sending contradictory orders to different units. It allocated resources to defend against attacks that weren't coming. It tried to predict human behavior using logic, but human behavior wasn't logical. In the White House bunker, President Martinez was receiving reports from around the world. The new tactics were working. The aliens were still winning battles, but they were winning them slowly and with much greater difficulty than before. The chaos strategy is causing system failures. In their command structure, reported Dr. Rachel Kim from her analysis of intercepted alien communications. They're spending more time trying to understand our actions than actually fighting us. General Carter nodded grimly. Then it's time to take this to the next level. We're going to give them so much chaos that their computer brain breaks down completely. The real test of humanity's new strategy was about to begin. The aliens had superior technology and firepower, but humans had something the Centauri had never encountered: the ability to be completely, utterly, and gloriously unpredictable. Operation Wildcard began at exactly midnight on the 7th day of the invasion. Across the entire planet, every human settlement, military base, and resistance group started doing something completely different from everyone else. It was the largest coordinated chaos event in human history. General Paul Baker stood in the Pentagon War Room, watching dozens of screens showing battles from around the world. Each screen showed something that would have been considered insane by any military academy, but that was exactly the point. Status report. He called out to his communications team. Sir, Team Alpha in Berlin is attacking the alien checkpoint while dressed as clowns. Team Beta in Tokyo is using trained dogs to deliver explosives while playing bagpipe music. Team Gamma in Sydney is conducting their assault entirely through interpretive dance. General Baker nodded seriously. And the alien response? Complete. Confusion, sir. Their communications are breaking down. They keep asking their commanders what the humans are trying to accomplish. In the skies over Los Angeles, pilot Emma Clark was leading the strangest air battle in history. She had painted her fighter jet with bright polka dots and was flying in patterns that spelled out random words in the sky. Her wingmen were doing barrel rolls while dropping leaflets with pictures of kittens on them. This is insane, her wingman radioed. The aliens are just sitting there watching us instead of shooting. That's the idea, Emma replied, then performed a perfect loop that looked completely accidental. They're trying to figure out if we're attacking them or putting on a show. The Centauri pilots were indeed confused. Their training had prepared them for aerial combat, not for opponents who seemed to be trying to entertain them while simultaneously dropping bombs on their ground forces. On the ground in Detroit, Dan Parker was leading a psychological warfare campaign that was driving the aliens to distraction. His team had set up speakers throughout the city and was broadcasting human music, poetry, and stand-up comedy directly at Centauri positions. Today we're playing jazz followed by death metal, then switching to children's lullabies, he explained to his team. After that, we'll read them love poems while setting off fireworks. The effect on alien forces was immediate and dramatic. Centauri soldiers, who had never heard music or poetry in their entire lives, began stopping in the middle of battles to listen. Some were seen standing motionless for hours, their weapons lowered, trying to understand what they were hearing. In occupied Paris, former teacher Mary Johnson was conducting an even stranger experiment. She had been capturing Xanthari soldiers, and instead of interrogating them, she was showing them human art and literature. "Look at this painting," she said to a captured alien through a translator device. "What do you see?" The Xanthari soldier stared at the abstract artwork for several minutes before responding. "I see ... colors that serve no purpose, lines that go nowhere. It is ... inefficient. But how does it make you feel?" Mary asked. The alien was quiet for a long time. Finally, it said something that shocked everyone in the room. "I do not understand." The question. That was when Mary realized the truth. The Xanthari didn't just lack creativity, they lacked emotions entirely. They had been bred or programmed to feel nothing except the satisfaction of completing orders efficiently. Meanwhile, in cyberspace, tech specialist Greg Foster was launching the most unusual hacking attack ever attempted. Instead of trying to break alien computer systems with advanced programming, he was flooding them with completely random data. "I'm sending them everything," he explained to his team. Cat videos, cooking recipes, sports statistics, love letters, shopping lists, weather reports from 1987. Just random human stuff with no pattern or purpose. The alien computer systems, designed to process logical information, began slowing down as they tried to analyze and categorize data that had no meaning. Some systems actually crashed because they couldn't determine what to do with a recipe for chocolate chip cookies. The breakthrough came when Dr. Helen Foster, working with the captured aliens, made a discovery that changed everything. One of the younger Xanthari soldiers, after being exposed to human music for several hours, asked a question that no member of his species had ever asked before. "Why you make sounds that serve no purpose?" "Music isn't supposed to serve a purpose," Dr. Foster explained gently. "It's supposed to make you feel something." "Feel?" the alien asked. "What is feel?" Dr. Foster spent the next hour trying to explain emotions to a creature that had never experienced them. Slowly, something began to change in the alien's behavior. It started asking more questions, making observations that weren't based on logic, and even attempting to hum along with the music. "This is incredible," Dr. Foster reported to headquarters. "We're not just confusing them with chaos. We're actually teaching them to think like individuals instead of like parts of a machine." The change was spreading through the Xanthari ranks. Like a virus, soldiers who had been exposed to human creativity began acting independently. They started questioning orders, making personal choices, and in some cases, refusing to fight altogether. War Prime Kethver, watching from his flagship, was experiencing something his species had never known: panic. The Prime Mind, the Great computer that controlled his entire fleet, was making more and more errors as it tried to process the chaos of human behavior. "Status report," he demanded from his subordinates. "War Prime, our forces are ... behaving strangely. Many units are not responding to orders." The Prime Mind is requesting clarification on human objectives, but there appear to be millions of different objectives, many of which contradict each other. Kethver stared at the tactical display showing Earth, instead of the organized resistance he expected. He saw complete chaos. Humans were attacking from everywhere and nowhere, using tactics that made no sense, fighting battles that seemed to have no strategic purpose. For the first time in his life, Kethver made a decision without consulting the Prime Mind. He decided that these humans were the most dangerous enemy his species had ever encountered, not because of their weapons or technology, but because they were teaching his own soldiers to think for themselves. The invasion was failing, but not in any way the Xanthari could understand or predict. Humanity was winning by refusing to fight the war the aliens expected them to fight. The Prime Mind broke down on the 10th day of the invasion. The great computer that had controlled the Zentari Empire for thousands of years simply stopped working. It couldn't process the millions of chaotic human actions happening simultaneously across the planet. War Prime Kethver stood alone in his command center for the first time in his life, staring at blank screens that should have been showing him tactical information. His subordinates waited for orders, but for the first time, he had no orders to give. War Prime, one of his officers said hesitantly. The Prime Mind is not responding. What are your instructions? Kethver realized with growing horror that he had never made a decision entirely on his own. Every choice, every action, every thought had been guided by the collective intelligence of his species. Now he was truly alone with his thoughts, and it terrified him. On Earth, Lieutenant Commander Julie Hayes was preparing for the most dangerous mission of her life. She was going to assault the Zentari flagship, using a plan so insane that it violated every rule of military strategy ever written. "Let me get this straight," said demolitions expert Rick Stone as they prepared their equipment. "We're going to fly directly at their biggest ship, broadcasting our surrender, while actually carrying enough explosives to blow a hole in their hull." Julie nodded. "And while we're doing that, Beth is going to upload a computer virus into their systems by pretending to send them our unconditional surrender documents." Communications Officer Beth Crawford looked nervous but determined. "The virus won't destroy their computers. It will just make them ... more human. It will introduce random thoughts, personal preferences, and individual decision-making into their collective consciousness." The plan had been created by programmers Matt Sullivan and Karen White, who had spent days studying captured Zentari technology. They had discovered that the alien computer systems had no defenses against illogical programming because they had never encountered it before. "Think of it like teaching a calculator to appreciate art," Matt had explained. "It doesn't know how to process that kind of information, so it has to learn new ways of thinking." Julie's team launched their attack just as the sun was setting over the Pacific Ocean. They flew straight at the massive Zentari flagship, broadcasting surrender messages while preparing for battle. It was exactly the kind of contradiction that the aliens could no longer understand. "Incoming human craft broadcasting surrender, but carrying weapons," reported a confused Zentari officer to Kethver. "Instructions?" For the first time in his species history, Kethver had to make up his own mind. "Let them approach," he decided. "If they wish to surrender, we will accept." But as Julie's ship docked with the flagship, everything went wrong for the aliens and right for the humans. Beth successfully uploaded the virus into the Zentari computer systems, while Rick's explosives created enough chaos to let the team fight their way to the command center. The virus spread through the alien ship like wildfire, but instead of destroying systems, it began changing how individuals Zentari thought. Suddenly, soldiers who had never questioned an order in their lives began asking why for the first time. "Why are we conquering this planet?" One soldier asked his commander. "Because the Prime Mind ordered it," the commander replied automatically. "But the Prime Mind is broken. So why are we still doing it?" The commander had no answer because he had never needed to think of one before. Throughout the ship, similar conversations were happening. Zentari, who had lived their entire lives as parts of a collective mind, were suddenly discovering that they were individuals with their own thoughts and feelings. Julie burst into the command center with her team, weapons ready, expecting a fight. Instead, she found Kethver standing alone, staring out at Earth through a large window. "Are you here to kill me?" he asked without turning around. "That depends," Julie replied, keeping her weapon pointed at him. "Are you going to keep trying to conquer our planet?" Kethver was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked a question that surprised everyone in the room. What is the point of conquest if there is no joy in victory? What do you mean? Julie asked. Your species fights not just to win, but because you believe in something. You create beauty, you feel emotions. You make choices based on what you want rather than what is logical. My species has forgotten how to want anything. Dr. Amy Roberts, who had been monitoring the assault from Earth, spoke through Julie's radio. Ask him what he wants now, not what his empire wants, but what he personally wants. Julie repeated the question. Kethver turned around, and for the first time, his large alien eyes seemed almost human. I want to understand, he said simply. I want to know what it feels like to choose my own path instead of following orders. I want to learn what my soldiers are discovering about being individuals. The war ended not with a great battle, but with a choice. Kethver ordered his fleet to withdraw from Earth, but many of his soldiers chose to stay. They wanted to learn more about human concepts like creativity, love, and individual freedom. 6 months later, Dr. Amy Roberts sat in her new laboratory, working alongside a former Xanthari scientist named Vethkar. They were developing new ways for humans and aliens to communicate and understand each other. Your species saved mine, Vethkar said in his slowly improving English. Not by defeating us, but by teaching us how to be individuals. Amy smiled. We didn't save you. You saved yourselves when you chose to think for yourselves, instead of letting a computer do it for you. Outside her window, she could see human children playing with young Xanthari who had chosen to stay on Earth. They were learning games, sharing stories, and creating art together. The children didn't care that their new friends looked different or came from another planet. They just cared that they were having fun together. The invasion had failed because the Xanthari had underestimated the most powerful force in the universe, the human ability to choose chaos over order, creativity over logic, and individual freedom over collective efficiency. They had tried to conquer Earth with superior technology, but humans had won with something far more powerful: the simple refusal to be anything other than gloriously, chaotically, beautifully human.